It didn't bring calm, it didn't bring peace, and it never will. In the years since the deal was reached, Iran's military budget has grown by almost 40%, while its economy is doing very badly. After the sanctions were lifted, the dictatorship used its new funds to build nuclear-capable missiles, support terrorism, and cause havoc throughout the Middle East and beyond.
That, of course, was U.S. President Donald Trump and the case for a formal withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal. Oil, quite predictably, shot up as this news was announced. Yet more uncertainty was injected into an already unstable time in a notoriously unstable part of the world. It's just the latest action from a president that shuns globalism, professes America first, and wants to end decades of multilateralism led by the U.S. If you zoom out a bit, there's a pretty clear line connecting this announcement and Trump's trade policies, his tariffs, and his core base of support in U.S. populism. Well, a new book out connects those dots pretty clearly for us. Us versus them. The failure of globalism is on shelves now. Ian Bremmer is the author and founder of the Eurasia Group. Ian, it's great to see you. Thanks for doing this. How does today's Iran announcement fit into the narrative that you lay out in this book?
It's certainly one more strike in the face of globalism. The United States telling its European allies to drop dead. The French president and the German chancellor came to the United States a week ago. By far, the top issue on their agenda was to try to keep President Trump on side to maintain the deal while they tried to come up with some additional efforts on ballistic missiles, on proxy wars, and the rest that would strengthen the terms of engagement with Iran. And Trump came out and said, absolutely not. I'm going to pull out all by myself. The Secretary of Defense of the United States strongly opposed that move. Trump didn't care. But to his base, he can say, I promise you this Iranian deal is horrible, and I'm out of it. There is no plan B. And it's we're definitely in a more challenging, a more explosive environment in the Middle East as a consequence of that.
And I mean, the link between isolationism on a foreign policy front and protectionism on a trade front, how do these tie back to the core basics of economic opportunity for that base of people that supported Trump in the first place?
Look, there are a lot of people in the United States that supported Trump, they supported Sanders, or what I should really say is they opposed the establishment. They believe that they've been lied to for decades, whether it's by mainstream Republicans or mainstream Democrats, by CEOs, by the media, by the public intellectuals. Lied when people said that open borders and free trade and U.S. armed forces all over the world would be good for them. And they don't feel that way, right? Because, you can have free trade, but American wages have stayed low. They've been flat for 40 years, and even with unemployment today at 3.9%, best since 2000, those wages are still dramatically low. We've seen very little investment in local infrastructure. We've seen borders open, and a lot of people say, how come you're taking care of immigrants when you haven't taken care of me and my family? You've got the United States involved in failed wars in Vietnam and Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria. And of course, it's not wealthy people fighting those wars. It's enlisted men and women and their families that take it on the chin. And they're sick of all of it. So the vote for Trump was a protest vote. A lot of people didn't vote at all in the most important election in our lifetimes. Protest. And these are people that they just don't want to hear it about open borders, open trade, and the United States providing security. They don't care about American allies. And when I write, Trump to allies drop dead, their response is, what are they doing for us? They're not paying their 2% for NATO. They just want to keep us involved in all these entanglements around the world. Iran saying death to America. Why should we do anything with the Iranians? That's the kind of reaction we're getting in the U.S. And as you know, very sadly, it's not just in the United States. It's across the advanced industrial democracies. You see larger and larger numbers of people that are saying that they really don't feel like their system is democratic. They think it's rigged against them.
But, I mean, it flies in the face of the last number of decades of American domestic domestic and foreign policy. I mean, we say, how can we make a deal with somebody who chants death to America? We rebuilt, or the U.S. rebuilt Germany, Japan. I mean, they invested American dollars in making sure the world was going to function again after World War II. In ceding that land and in ceding that role, have they just handed it off to the Russias and the Chinas of the world?
Well, that was the peak of globalism, right? I mean, if you think about after World War II, when the United States created the United Nations, and we actually had school children memorizing the charter of the UN back in the 50s and 60s. You'd call kids communists if you did that these days, right? And we rebuilt the Germans and rebuilt the Japanese, the Marshall Plan, General MacArthur. You're absolutely right. That was our view that long-term interests of the United States were well served to support globalism. But, you know, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, there was no one in Washington, no one in the United States was arguing, let's do a Marshall Plan for the defeated Soviets, let's help the Russians. Instead, we gave them shock therapy and we said, you guys will figure it out. We'll just expand NATO and expand the EU and you'll deal with it. I mean, that was over 25 years ago. So now let's go forward to 2018 when the global economy is growing at 4%, the U.S. economy is growing at 3%. We've got all this free trade, but the average American feels like all that globalism did nothing for them, and they really oppose it. We've allowed 11 Syrian refugees into the United States so far this year. I could name them. I could put their photographs up. And when I posted that a week ago on social media, half of the Americans responding said, that's 11 too many. That's not a United States with the Statue of Liberty. That's the United States with a lot of people that feel like they've been forgotten, and they're pretty angry about it.
Ian, I could talk about this for hours. It's a fantastic book. I was glad to get a copy of it. Thanks for writing it, and thanks for coming on the show today. Ian Bremmer, founder and president of the geopolitical risk firm Eurasia Group.